the Tyrant of Amphorius, the title that strikes fear into the hearts of all her enemies. In fact, just say the word Cerydra and you have the community up in arms about how good is she really. Some say she is a literal mass pool, while others suggest to skip the little gremlin for future versions. But one thing for sure is that this is the most divisive unit I've ever seen in version 3. Hey guys, MrPokke here, and for today's episode of Early Access Review, we are finally gonna be taking a look at Cerydra, our latest 5-star Wind Harmony that is pretty much, like I've mentioned just now, a very divisive unit that has a lot of different community sentiments regarding how her kit is actually gonna be functioning. So without further ado, let's get into today's content. So in summary, Cerydra is a Wind Harmony that functions pretty much like a true blue hyper carry support with the built-in 20 speed buff to allow you to hit 134 speed for a slow DPS, attack buff, res pen, skill damage, as well as her additional damage as a semi-sub DPS, which is also guaranteed to crit. The biggest highlight with Cerydra is going to be a charge mechanic that duplicates a skill at 6 stacks, so units like Phynon, Alexa, and Archer can instantly come into mind. Now the biggest concern with Cerydra is that her lack of action value advance for a hyper carry support is gonna be a little bit troubling, because the 20 speed increase means that players will definitely find better results pairing Cerydra alongside units like Sunday, Bronya, RMC to further amplify their buffs while not sacrificing too much action value. So this means that Cerydra's role is not so much as a standalone support, but rather a support that amplifies your hyper carry and their support even higher, replacing the slot of the previous secondary support in your hyper carry team comp. On top of that, her role, generally speaking, is going to be heavily leaning towards your skill damage scaling DPS, so that will eliminate 90% of the DPS roster in mind, which could say that Cerydra is definitely a much more dedicated support compared to a universal support such as Tribi as well as Robin. So jumping straight into her character kit, her basic attack is pretty much unused for the charge generation via the skill, but we can see a decent amount of usage on the very first turn in order to get the additional energy, get the additional skill point, because eventually at the end of the day, you are still going to be getting up to 6 out of 6 sets of charges once you're going to be casting her ultimate, which should be a turn 1 ultimate anyways. For a skill, that is pretty much the main gimmick of Cerydra combined with her talent, and you really want to time the effect of this skill, because taking a look at the buffs, 72% skill crit damage and 10% res pen is very nice, but keep in mind that these buffs are only active when Coup de Main is actually going to be triggered, which is going to be the Purage segment, right? So if you are not going to be getting this at 6 out of 6 stacks, that means that none of these buffs are actually active, which means that her damage amplification has a very high and low duration of window. So during times it's active, it's going to be very good, but at other times when it's not going to be active, then her buffs are pretty much going to be non-existent. Then talking about the Coup de Main or the duplicated skill, I'm just going to be calling the duplicated skill from now on, it does have quite a few gimmicks, which is it always triggers first before the original skill, retains all of the buffs for the unit itself, and you can allow the original skill to be used in cross waves, and you can change to another target if the main target dies. On top of all that, you can still activate this if Cerydra is going to be crowd controlled. This effect also lasts between the ultimate states for Phynon, so if for some reason you did not activate the enhanced skill during Phynon's ultimate, you can out again and maintain a 7 out of 6 stacks. On this point, it is extremely important to not waste your duplicated skill on weaker skills, especially for Phynon, because for Alexa and Archer, it's pretty much going to be mandatory, it's going to be around the same, but for Phynon, you really only want to use this during this enhanced skill window. No charge is going to be gained until the effect ends, so for example, Phynon after a 6 out of 6 charge will be back all the way to 0 out of 6 again, and multi-skill triggers like Alexa and Archer can further increase your charge stacking because each individual skill can count as an attack. Then jumping into Cerydra's ultimate is pretty fast for an energy regeneration as well as giving you 2 sets of charge. You really want to time this before you hit 6 out of 6 so that your unit won't actually overflow, and at 130 energy, she is guaranteed a 3-turn ultimate using the standard energy regeneration rope as well as Luxaga or Vormac combination. Assuming you're getting 6 attacks on the DPS, the Trace VC actually gives you a 30 energy, guaranteeing you with the ultimate even with a basic skill rotation. This 5 energy trace also maintains throughout the Phynon's departed state as well. Keep in mind that for units that hit multiple times very quickly, like Phynon phase change as well as Alexa skills, it is possible for 2-turn ultimates as well, even if you are going to be running a slower Cerydra. Now the multiplier itself on the ultimate is quite low, but since she does have 100% crit rate with built-in attack, crit damage, and additional damage for talent, it can add up, especially for the mobs. Then moving on into the talent, you ideally pretty much want to stack on 4000 attack for Vending Trace to have the full 360 crit damage buff, which would translate into a 960 attack buff, which is almost 2 attack percentage main stat for a 1270 attack unit just like Phynon. That being said, if you do not have enough attack, so you're going to be in 3,500, 3,200, it's still going to be doable if you want a little bit more survivability running HP percentage main stat, because a 3,000 attack Cerydra can still give you a 720 attack buff, and her personal damage is not the main focus over here. The additional damage can proc up to 20 times, which is a 1,200% multiplier per ultimate rotation, usually 3 turns. This proc is only going to be once for each attack, just like Robin, so multi-hits like Final Meteor cannot trigger additional procs every single time. And then lastly, jumping into a technique, you pretty much just want to use this so her skill instantly triggers, giving your DPS 20 speed at the start of the battle, allowing you to hit the 134 or 135 speed, satisfying the 2-turn conditions. It also gives you the additional 30 energy for free, just like Run Mei, so you can do a turn 1 ultimate with Finon even with a basic. Other units can also be a turn 1 ultimate after they take action, because you do gain the additional 5 energy from a BC, right? Then moving on into a major tracers, I mostly explained all of them during the kit just now, and nothing too complex. For Vanny, it gives you 360 crit damage, but like I mentioned, it's not going to be your main focus because speed and survivability is more important, especially in a sustainless team. Vidi allows for 100% crit rate and 1 more charge once per game, good for personal damage, and that 1 charge is going to be very, very important in fast clears. And lastly, VC is the perma 20 speed boost to ideally hit 134 speed for DPS in front of your 133.4 Sunday or Bronya, and the 5 energy helps Cerydra maintain a 3-turn ultimate rotation. Now keep in mind, for this speed buff, it only lasts for 3 turns, so if you're going to be going up in situations, for example against like Hule, where he challenges you to a duel, and for the entire 3 turns you are not going to be getting any buffs from Cerydra, the speed buff actually runs out, which means that your next support like Sunday and Bronya is actually going to be faster than your slower DPS, right? So just keep that into consideration. And then for a minor trace, 22.4% wind damage, 18% attack, and 10% HP. Nothing too crazy, just works with a kit. And for skill 11 priority, skill over talent over ultimate over her basic attack. Now jumping into her Lightcone, her signature Lightcone is going to be giving you 64% personal attack, 1 skill point after an ultimate to attack, as well as a 54% skill damage. Taking a look at this table over here, the event Lightcone comparison, which is the one you play from the event, the food event, as well as the S1, is going to be roughly a 15% damage difference. Now a great thing about Cerydra is that she's not super reliant on the S1, thanks to the event Lightcone we get, which is, personally, I think it was one of the best events that I've ever played in HSR, giving you an 80% attack buff at max limit break. Now this is in contrast to, for example, Sunday and his S1, or most DPSs and their respective S1, so it's not going to be that crazy. But keep in mind that the attack percentage is not going to be maxed out immediately for your event Lightcone, because Cerydra needs to scale 2 more times in order to hit the highest 80% attack in battle. That being said, the additional skill point from the signature Lightcone is extremely nice for comfort, especially for Archer, because you can see in this clip over here, where we let go of all of Archer's hits, the +1 skill point gave us an additional skill, which then proc the duplicate skill, and this gives my Archer enough energy to cast the ultimate, right? Otherwise, when in doubt, for pretty much any Harmony support other than Babin, Duns can also be used for 0-200 speed, although the event Lightcone will be the best replacement for most situations. Between all of the Harmony support Lightcones, Sunday S1 still has a much higher priority to players who do not have that yet, as well as the fact that you are going to be using Sunday. Then jumping into your Relic portion, the perfect fit for Cerydra as well as Luke Shaka, just like any hypercarry support, not too much explanation neither. You could go for a Vulnerable with some 0 cycle setup, so generally speaking, Cerydra and Luke Shaka is going to be your set bonus. Your mains that are going to be attack percentage body, speed or attack percentage shoes, sphere is going to be attack percentage, robe is going to be energy regeneration, and your subsets are going to be speed as well as attack percentage. Now, taking a look at these two comparisons over here, I personally like to max out the attack with a double attack percentage main, hitting at least 4,400 of the S1, but you still hit the 4,100 attack in battle with the event S5, although it would take you 3 skills for the attack percentage scaling to go up, which is why you're going to be seeing over here 3,610 is going to be on the screen, but in battle that is going to save 4,100. Now keep in mind that because her 24% attack buff for DPS has no ceiling, higher attack will always translate into more damage for herself as well as her DPS. Final sustainers as well as other DPS with a sustain should also not find too much issues resorting to a defensive main stat, generally speaking. Now for the energy regeneration is pretty self-explanatory, but for the speed boost and attack boost, you can also go about it in both ways. Slow Cerydra running attack percentage boost can definitely see play, because she herself also gains a 20 speed buff, resulting in a combat speed of between 140 to 150, even running an attack percentage boost, which means that she's still going to be hitting the 134 effective, translating into a minimum of 2 turns. For final, there is not too big of a difference between speed and attack boost, since the next phase will end the cycle and the rest of the units will pretty much not going to be fast fast enough to hit 150 AV, so opting for attack percentage for more buffs can also be considered. Then moving on into Cerydra's Eidolons, very strong E1, pretty okay E2, and her E6 make her damage go extremely high, which reminds me a lot of most Harmony support Eidolons you're going to be seeing nowadays, right? Then for the Eidolon 1, you are going to be getting a 36% defense down on top of everything else that you're going to be getting in the base kit. Given that her built-in kit is going to be attack, crit damage, and res pen, defense down is a very good damage amplification, especially since you're going to be getting a 36% defense ignore value. It stacks on very nicely with Anexa's built-in defense down that goes all the way up to 40% with his S1 and Tracers, which means that if you're going to be running Anexa with 4-piece Quantum of a Sunday S1, you can reach 90 to 96% defense down for an absurd damage increase. But once again, keep in mind, all of these buffs, the 36% is going to be active during the 6 stats of the Peerless state, right? During the pair, we're going to actually be duplicating the skill. So other than that, it's going to be a permanent 16% defense shred. The additional 2 energy also counts as one more stack for Phynon. In a 1 burst rotation basis, it's not going to be that impactful because Phynon can clear all of the current content with his respective teammates in 1 ultimate. But should a battle require a 2nd ultimate, it would be a very considerable upgrade, especially if you're going to be going timing for the 0 cycle, leaving his ultimate and getting back up in time, especially if you're not going to be fighting against a Ventrine. This additional stat can be very nice. Then jumping into the Eidolon 2 is going to be a 40% damage buff with 160% personal damage buff, quite useful with an ultimate and additional damage numbers to deal with the mobs, and decently high damage percentage the buff itself, but it's not going to be that impressive for an E2. And the Eidolon 4 is going to be an ultimate damage multiplier of 240%, so wow, you almost double your ultimate damage, which means you can clear the mob a little bit faster. Then jumping into the Eidolon 6, it functions very similarly like your other E6 harmonies to boost their personal damage, 20% more res pen for the ally as well as for herself, and a multiplier for the additional damage increase 6 times from 60% to 360%. So TLDR just going to dealing a lot more damage. So at the end of the day, between E1 as well as S1, both are great vertical investments if you really need them, but E1 is a higher damage increase compared to S1 due to the event alternative Lightcone and how much more raw damage E1 can actually give you. On the other hand, S1 is a better pick for comfort because the 1 skill point can be very nice for a lot of different scenarios, especially for the general population which is not going to be chasing on damage numbers. Keep in mind, it is only the ultimate to attack, so harmonies aside from Chibi, you cannot gain a +1 skill point, unlike for example Runmay's signature Lightcone. Moving on into the team comps, for this segment, I'm gonna specifically focus on the Phynon variants because he has the widest roster of different supports you can use, while Anexa and Archer, they are relatively fixed, with Anexa running Sunday and Archer running Sparkle for their best in slots, both with a final sustain slot in the slot 4. All units tested in this showcase is going to be E0 S1. Bronya had an E2 activated, but it was pretty much not that useful, although the E1 Bronya was very useful as well. And as you can see on this table here, we are going to be getting the triple 0 cycle for every single variation in both the current and the next Memory of Chaos rotation. Now, generally speaking, Phynon has the biggest upgrade from his previous slot of Team Green RMC or Bronya, and then you build a team with Cerydra, plus 1 action value buffer like RMC, Sunday or Bronya, and 1 aura buffer like Runmei, or if you want to, a 2nd action value buffer can work as well. So the flexibility for Phynon is going to be very high. I will always include the RMC in the 7 today, as they are pretty much the most common slot for any players playing Honkai Star Rail, and honestly, RMC is just that good with the free stack on the Mimi buff as well as the 100% action value advance. I play around mainly with the slot tree, and due to time constraint, I am going to be limiting to these 3 teams over here, which are going to be the most common among the player base. Look forward to the future videos where I can test even more teams on the live server. Now, since every single team here is pretty much going to be a 0 cycle, I'll just briefly explain how each of them play so you can get a better understanding of the rotations with regards to which unit you want to pair with Phynon. So for every single variation, this is going to be the general tip. You always want to time your RMC's additional turn immediately after Phynon, no matter what, because this will give you the highest action value advantage and the 3 bonus stacks if used properly. 1 from the mini buff itself and 2 from the additional Phynon skill, which is going to be using on his immediate turn. The Cerydra ultimate was also held right before the transformation so that you can gain the highest possible damage between Runmei, Bronya ultimates, as well as saving your charge stacks. If the ultimate is used too quickly, it could lead to an awkward situation where you hit 6 out of 6 too early, and Phynon cannot use his normal skill because it will waste the duplicate skill. Generally speaking, you also want to use basic on Phynon's turn first, essentially stalling for his transformation state to make it within the next wave. If you kill the enemies too quickly with the first action bringing a duplicate skill into a skill, so everybody just dies immediately, then a transformation burst will only occur when the cycle ends on the next wave, which means you are going to be losing more damage because you will completely miss out on the transformation damage when Phynon exits exits the ultimate. You could also consider starting for 2 basics into the enhanced skill, which is going to be a viable strategy for E0, S0 Final, or if you want to let your enhanced skill go into the next wave. Now keep in mind that for the next Memory of Chaos, you are pretty much almost going to be forced to skill immediately because the Manta Ray will spawn 2 of her summons, so using a basic and allowing her to spawn mobs may be worse for you because the 2 enhanced skills might not be able to kill all 4 targets, so it depends on the endgame environment which you're going to be using Final in. Now moving on to the specifics for all of the 3 teams. For Sunday, this was going to be the easiest variation to play because it's extremely smooth. You're going to be using your RMC skill, followed by a Seri basic, followed by Finon, Sunday, Finon, Mimi, Finon. It will always lead to the perfect 12 stacks and activate Cerydra ultimate for the 6 out of 6 charge, and you enter into the final ultimate state. No matter if you use your basic or skill with Cerydra on the very first turn, the charge will always balance out to duplicate 1 more enhanced skill within a rotation, so it's not that big of a difference. So in grand total, you're going to be getting 2 enhanced skill duplicates. I always cast basic with Seri first instead of the skill because Mimi's extra action would need 1 more skill point to finish off the perfect 12 call flips. Other than that, this team is very easy to play. Going on into Bronya, we are going to be opting for a hyperspeed Bronya here to do a basic first, using Cerydra's skill to gain 1 more charge. Now this is very important because using a slow Bronya will lead to her action clashing with Mimi's action very advanced after Finon's skills, which means you're going to be wasting an entire final turn. You will take 1 hit generally speaking for most enemies, reaching 100%, and you can bring up Finon from there, and he'll perfectly go again after Bronya's next skill, hitting 13 to 14 stacks to transform, and the additional stack is pretty much going to be depending if you're going to be getting hit. Now do know that unless you have an E6 Bronya, you have to transform immediately after Bronya's skill, or her buff is going to expire, but given this rotation, you will have pretty much no issues hitting your 12 stacks even if Finon did not get hit. The rest of the gameplay is pretty much the same. Store with 1 basic, enhanced skill times 2 should clear the wave and bring you to the next phase, and because we've stored in our wave 1, our transformation burst will happen in this cycle, whilst allowing Mimi to pull up Finon 1 last time to finish off with 1 more skill, perfectly ending this entire run itself, which honestly, when I was filming this, it was extremely satisfying. Now do know that if you cannot clear the stage using the exact same setup, he will be at 7 out of 12 of the core flames, and Bronya will be 45 action value weight, as you can see from this screenshot over here. The speed tuning will instantly allow Phylon to cast skill twice, but as you can see, we lack 1 more skill point, so running a 4-piece pass-by will be needed for an instant transformation, or you can opt for a 200 speed RMC to outspeed Bronya over here. Lastly, for Runmei, this was my personal most uncomfortable slot, so for if whatever reason you do not want to use Bronya, this can still be a viable team for even a 0 cycle. Damage wise, it's actually higher than Bronya due to Runmei's rare spell and damage buff, but stack generation will be a lot slower if you cannot finish the enemies in a single ultimate. This is not going to be too big of a problem for Sunday and Bronya because they do give Final a lot of additional turns, which generates 2 stacks every single time Final will do attack. I actually had to rely on Final getting hit at least twice over here, so Cerydra's 1 last skill can get us into transformation. If you're going to be getting to 12 out of 12, then the rest of the run is going to be a lot easier because, like I mentioned, he deals more damage with Runmei compared to Bronya, so the biggest issue is just getting Final to take 2 hits without sustaining too much damage. And with that being established, this is going to be our last segment, and that is going to be his endgame performance. For this, I'm only going to be discussing a Nexa and Finon while I run them in the 3 same endgame content, so stay tuned for the upcoming 0 cycles and live server videos to explore even more options, right? Jumping into the Memory of Chaos, for both units, their performances were very exceptional, although Finon does see a more considerable damage increase since a Nexa can utilize Robin better than Finon. In a sustainless run, then Cerydra's value actually really shines for a Nexa, and this statement will also hold true for Archer. Now, I've already mentioned in all of the notes in Memory of Chaos in the previous sim for Finon, and a Nexa for himself over here, he plays extremely smoothly and technically even easier to play than Finon since you do not have to time Cerydra's charge timings as much, and he will just spam skills whenever 6 sets are gonna be up. Keep in mind that the duplicate skill can also trigger even if a Nexa just uses his basic attack, and you cannot use a Nexa ultimates in between the skill procs. For pure Viction, Finals was gonna be a lot better with Cerydra, and a Nexa definitely could use the help of more AoE units, example with Tribi as well as Hyacinth, to deal with the mobs better. In this particular slot, a Nexa with Dihara can also be a very good choice for those who pull her, so Cerydra's use case for a Nexa in pure Vision is not going to be that significant. And then lastly, for Apoc Shadows, the AI for Finals is just a little bit silly to use the counter move against 3 wolves, but But other than that, he plays like just how he plays in Memory of Chaos, as per the notes mentioned earlier. Very great clear on a full auto. And for our Nexa, really fast break capable of instant breaking within a single duel, notably on the second phase. One main issue is that Cerydra's speed buff actually runs out for a Nexa since it's only 3 turns during the duel, resulting in Sunday outspeeding a Nexa for next rotation, which means you lose 1 Nexa turn. Other than that, it is still an exceptional clear time considering we did run an Nexa with a sustain for every single one of these showcases over here. With that, we've pretty much come to the end of Cerydra's early access. I actually played with her a lot of times, especially with Final and Nexa, so I cannot wait for her to actually come out in the live server. At the end of the day, I would say that for the general pooling consensus, whether or not you should even consider getting her into your roster, if you are going to be a Final main, I think Cerydra is going to bring your account exceptional value, especially if you do not have an E2 Final. So consider this as a vertical investment, just like Tiaoqiu to Acorn, as well as Hyacinth to Cast Series. For other DPSs, especially if you're going to be running a Nexa or even Archer, I would say that Cerydra's value is not going to be as high or rather as urgent compared to Final, because the upgrades over these units are not going to be as substantial, because in a run with a sustain, that slot number 3 over there does have a placement, which is for example Robin on a Nexa as well as 3B for Archer, or even Silver Wolf and Cypher for Archer, which means that her role, generally speaking, on Cerydra is going to be more replaceable in your team comps running a Nexa and Archer, but her role in Final's team is going to be a lot less replaceable, because the next Cerydra downgrade in Final right now is pretty much going to be units like Ting Yun or even Rami or RMC if you're not going to be using them in the same team. If you were to add Cerydra into a Final rotation, this means that you can actually run Final with Sunday, with Cerydra, with RMC, with Rami, with Bronya, with all these kind of units, and which means that generally speaking, the value you're getting out of Cerydra is going to be most utilized within a Final team, right? So that is pretty much it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I try to tune down all of my early access a little bit shorter to get the information a little bit more concise. Sorry if I speak a little bit too fast this time because, you know, right? So let me know if you have any questions and drop down in the comments below. Word of the day is gonna be Tyrant. Join Discord, join our Patreon for all of our anime reacts and use code for 10% off game yourselves. All the best of our pools. I'll see you guys next time.